Chapter 1. The Scarlet Moon. Hey, beautiful souls. Are you ready for a journey that will take you from the depths of heartbreak to the heights of true power? From betrayal so devastating it shatters everything you thought you knew, to love so fierce it could reshape the very fabric of the werewolf world. Tonight, we're diving into a story where ancient bloodlines hold secrets that could save or destroy everything, where the Crimson Moon decides more than just fate, and where sometimes the most painful rejection becomes the greatest gift. I need you to buckle up because we're about to meet Ember Ravencrest, a woman whose world is about to explode in the most brutal way possible. But here's what I want you to remember as we begin. Sometimes we have to lose everything to discover the fire that's been burning inside us all along. Are you with me? Then let's step into the Shadowpine territory on the night that changed everything. The Crimson Moon hung like a bleeding wound over the Shadowpine Pack's ceremonial grounds, casting eerie red shadows between the towering pine trees that had witnessed countless mating ceremonies. Ember Ravencrest pressed her back against the rough bark of the ancient oak where she and Damien had carved their initials 2 years ago, trying to calm her racing heart. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. Her 22nd birthday, the night when the mate bond would fully solidify between her and Damien Stormclaw, future alpha of the Shadowpine Pack. The night when all her dreams would finally come true. She smoothed down her ceremonial crimson dress, the one her mother had worn, and her mother's mother before that. The silk whispered against her skin like a promise of forever. Around her, pack members gathered in their finest clothes, their excited chatter filling the cool night air with anticipation. Ember, the deep voice made her turn, and there he was, Damien Stormclaw in all his devastating glory. 6'4" of pure alpha dominance, with golden hair that caught the moonlight and those piercing blue eyes that had haunted her dreams since childhood. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, recognizing her intended mate. Damien. She stepped toward him, reaching for his hands like she had 1,000 times before. I can hardly believe tonight is finally. He stepped back. The small movement hit her like a physical blow. Damien had never stepped away from her touch. Never. Damien. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. What's wrong? Around them, the pack began to form the traditional ceremony circle. Alpha Stormclaw, Damien's father, stood at the center with the ancient mating chalice while Luna Sarah offered Ember an encouraging smile that somehow felt hollow. We need to talk, Damien said, his voice strangely formal. Before the ceremony, Ember forced a laugh, though something cold was beginning to crawl up her spine. Pre-ceremony nerves. I know it's overwhelming, but I can't do this, Ember. The words hit her like silver bullets to the chest. The ceremonial circle continued forming around them, but suddenly everything felt distant, muffled, like she was drowning. Can't do what? But she knew. Oh goddess, she knew. Damien's jaw tightened, and for just a moment she saw pain flash across his features before his expression hardened into something unrecognizable. I can't accept the mate bond. I won't claim you. The forest tilted sideways. Ember's knees nearly buckled, but her pride, that stubborn Ravencrest pride, kept her upright. Around them, pack members began to notice something was wrong. Whispers started, confused murmurs rippling through the gathered wolves. Why? The single word tore from her throat like a wounded animal's cry. Damien looked everywhere but at her. You're not strong enough to be Luna. The pack needs someone who can lead beside me. Someone who can handle the responsibility. Someone who what? Ember's wolf snarled beneath her skin, hurt transforming into fury. Someone with a stronger bloodline. Someone whose wolf isn't so. He gestured vaguely at her. Weak. The word hit her like a slap. Weak. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. The Ravencrest line carries ancient fire, little flame. Never let anyone make you feel weak. But standing here, watching the man she'd loved since childhood destroy her with casual cruelty, weak was exactly how she felt. Ember, dear, is everything all right? Luna Sarah approached, her face creased with worry. The pack had formed their full circle now, waiting. Expectant faces turned toward them. Friends, family, wolves who'd watched her grow up believing she'd one day be their Luna. The weight of their attention felt crushing. No, Ember whispered, then louder, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. No, everything is not all right. She turned to face the assembled pack, and somehow found the strength to lift her chin. The Ravencrest bloodline might be considered minor by today's standards, but her ancestors had been proud wolves. She would not crumble here, not in front of everyone she'd ever known. Damien Stormclaw has chosen to reject our destined mate bond. The words felt like glass in her throat, but she spoke them clearly. He finds me weak. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's grandmother whispered a prayer to the moon goddess. Alpha Stormclaw's face darkened with what looked like embarrassment, or maybe anger. Damien finally met her eyes, and for just a second, she saw the boy she'd grown up with. The one who'd held her after nightmares, who'd promised they'd always be together. But then his alpha mask slipped back into place. "I'm sorry, Ember. This is for the good of the pack." She stood there for an eternal moment, surrounded by her pack, but feeling utterly alone. The mate bond she'd felt growing stronger over the years, that golden thread connecting her heart to his, began to wither. The pain was indescribable, like someone was slowly tearing her soul in half. But Ember Ravencrest was done begging. Fine. She stripped off her grandmother's ceremonial dress, letting it fall to the forest floor in a puddle of crimson silk. Underneath, she wore simple clothes, jeans and a sweater that suddenly felt like armor. "Then I reject you too, Damien Stormclaw. I reject this pack that finds me weak. And I reject a future where I'm not enough." She shifted without warning, her wolf bursting free in an explosion of silver and flame that sent several pack members stumbling backward. Her wolf was smaller than most, yes, but she was fast and fierce, with an unusual silver coat that seemed to shimmer with its own inner fire. Standing on 4 legs, she threw back her head and howled, a sound so full of pain and rage and stubborn determination that it seemed to shake the very trees. Then, before anyone could stop her, she turned and ran. Behind her, she heard Damien call her name. But Ember Ravencrest was done listening to voices that told her she wasn't enough. She ran until her paws bled, until the familiar sense of Shadowpine territory faded behind her, until she crossed the border into the vast wilderness that stretched beyond Packlands. She ran until she couldn't run anymore, then collapsed beside a moonlit stream and let herself finally, truly break. But even as she cried for her lost love, her shattered dreams, her uncertain future, a small flame of defiance burned in her chest. She was Ember Ravencrest, granddaughter of Elena. Ravencrest, keeper of the old stories. Her bloodline might be considered minor, but it was ancient. There were secrets in her family line that even she didn't fully understand yet. Damien Stormclaw thought she was weak. She'd show him. She'd show them all exactly how powerful a weak wolf could become. But first, she had to survive the night alone in territory she'd never seen before, with the scent of strange wolves drifting on the autumn wind. And something else. Something that made her newly awakened wolf sit up and take notice. The scent of magic. Old magic. The kind that hadn't been seen in the werewolf world for generations. What have I stumbled into? She wondered as unfamiliar howls echoed in the distance, and her blood began to hum with power she'd never felt before. Chapter 2. Dawn of Defiance. Dawn was still hours away when Ember finally lifted her muzzle from her paws. The stream bubbled softly beside her, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called to its mate, a sound that sent a fresh spike of pain through her chest. She'd cried herself empty beside this little stream, her tears mixing with the clear water that reflected the waning crimson moon. But now, as the initial shock began to fade, reality crept in with cold fingers. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her 22 years. No pack, no territory, no future she could see clearly. Ember shifted back to her human form, immediately regretting it as the autumn cold bit through her clothes. She'd grabbed a backpack before fleeing, some instinct making her snatch it from her car, but she hadn't exactly packed for a wilderness survival adventure. A water bottle half empty, a granola bar, her phone which showed no signal this deep in the forest, and tucked at the bottom, wrapped in soft cloth, her grandmother's journal, the one filled with stories about the old bloodlines and ancient pack magic. "Okay, Ember," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the stream. "You wanted to prove you weren't weak. Time to figure out how to survive." She followed the stream deeper into the unknown territory, figuring water would lead to some kind of civilization eventually. The forest here felt different from Shadowpine lands. Wilder somehow, with trees so massive their trunks could house entire families. The air hummed with a strange energy that made her wolf pace restlessly under her skin. Then she caught the scent. Wolves. Multiple wolves and close. Heart hammering, Ember froze, every instinct screaming at her to run. But she was exhausted, heartbroken, and frankly had nowhere left to run to. So instead, she lifted her chin and called out, "I know you're there. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just passing through." 3 wolves stepped out of the shadows. No, not wolves. They were in human form, but she could sense their beasts just beneath the surface, ready to emerge. 2 women and a man, all tall and powerfully built, with an alertness that screamed border patrol. The taller woman stepped forward first, a striking brunette with golden eyes and scars across her knuckles that spoke of battles won. "You're on Ironwood territory, little wolf, and you smell like..." She tilted her head, nostrils flaring. "Heartbreak and Shadowpine." "Former Shadowpine," Ember corrected, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "As of about 6 hours ago." One of the other women, blonde with kind eyes but a warrior's stance, exchanged a look with her companions. "Rejected," she said quietly. The word hit like a physical blow, but Ember forced herself not to flinch. "Is it that obvious?" "The scent of a severed mate bond is distinctive," the brunette said, not unkindly. "I'm Zara. This is Maya and Nox." She gestured to her companions. "And you are?" "Ember. Ember Ravencrest." All 3 border guards went very still. Zara's golden eyes widened slightly, and she exchanged another look with Maya. This one loaded with significance Ember couldn't interpret. "Ravencrest," Zara repeated slowly. "As in the old bloodlines?" "The ones from the legends." "What legends?" Ember's grandmother had always hinted that their family line was special, but most packs considered the Ravencrests a minor bloodline. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need to get through your territory. You're not going anywhere." The voice came from behind her, and Ember spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing was the most magnificent man she'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered with jet black hair that seemed to absorb moonlight and eyes so dark they looked like pieces of the night sky. But it wasn't just his physical presence that made her wolf sit up and take notice. It was the power rolling off him in waves. Alpha. This man was an alpha. And not just any alpha. This was an alpha in his prime, radiating the kind of authority that made lesser wolves instinctively bare their necks. "Alpha Phoenix," Zara said, immediately dropping into a respectful posture. "We found her by the stream. I know exactly who she is." Those midnight eyes fixed on Ember with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Ember Ravencrest. Shadowpine's cast off." Cast off. Like she was a piece of unwanted clothing. "I wasn't cast off," Ember snapped, her exhaustion making her reckless. "I chose to leave." Alpha Phoenix moved closer, and she caught his scent, cedar and leather and something wild that made her mouth go dry. "Did you? Or did Damien Stormclaw finally grow a spine and acknowledge what everyone already knew?" And what exactly did everyone know? The words came out like shards of ice. His smile was sharp as a blade. "That you were never meant to be Luna. That your bloodline, however ancient, has been diluted over generations into something." His eyes raked over her dismissively. "Ordinary." There was that word again. Ordinary. Something snapped inside Ember's chest, not breaking this time, but igniting. Her wolf surged forward with a snarl, and power she didn't know she possessed crackled through the air around her. The temperature spiked 20 degrees in an instant, and flames began forming in the grass at her feet. Not destructive fire, but something controlled, beautiful, alive with silver light. All 4 Ironwood wolves took a step back. Zara's eyes went wide with something that looked like awe, while Maya and Nox dropped into defensive crouches. But Alpha Phoenix smiled like he'd just won a bet with himself. "Well," he said, his voice rich with satisfaction. "That's not ordinary at all, is it?" Ember stared at the silver flames dancing around her feet. She'd never done anything like this before. Never even known she could. Her grandmother's journal suddenly felt like it was burning through her backpack. What just happened?" she whispered. "You just proved that Damien Stormclaw is an even bigger fool than I thought." Alpha Phoenix stepped closer, seemingly unbothered by the supernatural fire radiating from her. "Tell me, little Ravencrest, what do you know about your family's true history?" "My grandmother used to tell stories about the old magic, the first packs. But they were just stories." "Were they?" His hand reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped just short. "Your great-great-grandmother was Selena Ravencrest, the Flame Keeper, the most powerful fire magic user in recorded history." The world tilted again, but this time it wasn't from heartbreak. It was from the sudden, overwhelming sense that everything she thought she knew about herself was wrong. That's impossible. We're nobody special. My father always said. Your father was a fool who married into the bloodline and never understood what he'd gained. Alpha Phoenix's eyes gleamed in the firelight. But you're not him, are you, Ember? You're your grandmother's granddaughter. Elena Ravencrest's blood runs in your veins. You knew my grandmother? I knew of her, and I know that she hid what she was to protect her family. But hiding time is over. He gestured to the flames still dancing at her feet. The magic is awakening whether you want it to or not. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Ember looked around at the four wolves watching her with expressions ranging from wariness to fascination. She thought about Damien, about his cruel dismissal, about the pack that had watched her humiliation without a single voice raised in her defense. She thought about her grandmother's journal burning against her back, full of secrets she'd never bothered to explore. And she thought about the flames at her feet, proof that she was anything but ordinary. I'm going to learn, she said finally. I'm going to learn everything I should have known all along. Alpha Phoenix's smile was predatory and approving. Good. Then you'll be staying in Ironwood territory. I didn't agree to. You don't have a choice. His voice brooked no argument. A Ravencrest with awakening powers can't wander the wilderness alone. You'll either stay here where you can be trained properly, or I'll have you delivered to the Council for evaluation. The Council. Every wolf knew what that meant. Being studied like a lab rat, powers tested and catalogued, freedom stripped away in the name of safety. And if I stay here? She asked carefully. Then you learn to control what's inside you. You discover what your bloodline is truly capable of. And maybe, his eyes glittered with something that might have been anticipation, maybe you get your revenge on the pack that threw away the most valuable thing they ever had. Revenge. The word sent a thrill through her that probably should have been concerning. But as she stood there surrounded by flames and possibility, Ember found she didn't care about should-haves anymore. She'd spent her whole life trying to be good enough for Shadowpine, trying to fit into their vision of what a proper Luna should be. Maybe it was time to find out what she could become when she stopped trying to be what others wanted. I'll stay, but I have conditions. Alpha Phoenix raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to make demands. Aren't I? She gestured to the flame-covered ground. You want to train me? Fine, but I won't be a prisoner. I won't be anyone's project or experiment, and I won't be anyone's replacement for something they've lost. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. Fair enough. Welcome to Ironwood territory, Ember Ravencrest. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Ember? Tomorrow we start unlocking whatever your grandmother hid in that blood of yours. I have a feeling Damien Stormclaw is going to regret his choice even more than he already does. As the Alpha disappeared back into the forest, Zara approached cautiously. Well, she said with a grin that was equal parts impressed and sympathetic. Welcome to the pack, Flame Dancer. Something tells me things are about to get very interesting around here. Ember looked down at her flame-covered feet, then up at the crimson moon hanging like a promise above the ancient trees of Ironwood territory. Damien had called her weak. Her father had told her she was nobody special. But standing here with power crackling under her skin and secrets waiting to be unlocked, Ember Ravencrest was beginning to suspect they'd all been very, very wrong. The only question was just how extraordinary could one ordinary wolf become? And what would happen when her old pack discovered what they'd really thrown away? Chapter 3. Fire and Steel. Ember woke to the smell of cedar smoke and bacon, scents so different from the lavender and vanilla that had filled her childhood home that for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back like ice water to the face. The rejection, the flight, the flames spreading at her feet like something out of a fairy tale. She sat up in the narrow bed, taking in her surroundings by morning light. Zara had brought her to a small cabin on the edge of Ironwood territory. Not pack housing exactly, but not exile either. A place for visitors, Zara had explained with diplomatic care, or for dangerous unknowns who needed to be watched. Ember, you awake in there? Zara's voice carried warmth and something that might have been excitement. Alpha wants to see you at first light. And honey, that sun's been up for an hour already. Coming, Ember called, then winced at how rough her voice sounded. She'd cried more in the past 12 hours than she had in years. She splashed cold water on her face from the basin Zara had left, trying to wash away the evidence of her breakdown. In the small mirror above the washstand, A stranger looked back at her. Same long auburn hair, same forest green eyes, but there was something different now, harder, like she'd shed some essential softness overnight. Zara waited on the porch with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a knowing smile. She was dressed in practical clothes, jeans, boots, a flannel shirt that had seen better days. But she moved with the fluid grace of a warrior. "Sleep at all?" Zara asked, offering her one of the mugs. "Some." Ember wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, letting the heat seep into her bones. "I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all some horrible nightmare. The rejection or the magic?" The question was asked gently, but it still made Ember flinch. "Both. Either. I don't know anymore." Zara's expression softened with understanding. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but what happened to you might be the best thing that could have happened. Getting publicly humiliated and banished from my pack was the best thing? Getting free of a pack that couldn't see your worth was the best thing," Zara corrected firmly. "Trust me on this one. I've been where you are." Something in Zara's tone made Ember look at her more carefully. There were old scars on the woman's knuckles, and now that she thought about it, Zara had recognized the scent of a severed mate bond awfully quickly last night. "You were rejected too? Worse." Zara's smile turned sharp-edged. "I was the one doing the rejecting. Turns out my destined mate was a controlling bastard who thought mate bond meant ownership papers. Breaking that bond nearly killed me, but it was still the best decision I ever made." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, following a winding path deeper into Ironwood territory. The forest here felt alive in a way Shadowpine lands never had, like the very trees were watching, waiting, holding their breath. "Zara," Ember asked finally, "last night, when I told you my name, you all reacted like you'd seen a ghost. What did Alpha Phoenix mean about my great-great-grandmother?" Zara stopped walking and turned to face her. "What do you know about pack history? Real history, not the sanitized versions they teach pups. I know the first packs were formed during the Great Expansion when humans started claiming more territory, and we needed to band together for protection. I know about the pack wars, the council formation." Ember trailed off. "My grandmother used to tell me other stories, though. Older ones about wolves who could command the elements, who could speak to the spirits themselves. Your grandmother was a smart woman. Those stories are true, or they were once upon a time." Zara started walking again, her voice taking on the cadence of someone sharing sacred knowledge. "Before the wars, before the council, there were bloodlines that carried what we call the old magic. Earth shapers, mind speakers, healers who could bring the dead back from the brink. The Ravencrests were the most powerful of all. They were called flame keepers because their magic was tied to the life force itself." Ember's steps faltered. "But that's impossible. Magic like that doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't it?" Zara's golden eyes glinted with mischief. "What would you call what you did last night? The flames, the impossible, beautiful flames that had danced from her feet like living things." Ember had been telling herself it was some kind of fluke, stress-induced hallucination. Anything but actual magic. "I don't understand," she whispered. "If this is real, if my bloodline really carries this kind of power, why didn't anyone tell me? Why did my parents? Because magic makes people nervous," a deep voice said from ahead of them. "And nervous people do stupid things." Alpha Phoenix stepped out from behind a massive pine tree like he'd been waiting for them. In the morning light, he was even more devastating than he'd been in moonlit shadows. All sharp angles and controlled power, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt like they were formal wear. "Alpha," Zara said with a respectful nod. "I was just explaining." "I heard." His dark eyes fixed on Ember with an intensity that made her wolf sit up and take notice. "The question is, what does our little Ravencrest plan to do with the truth?" "Stop calling me little," Ember said, surprised by her own boldness. "And I plan to learn everything I should have known from the beginning." Something that might have been approval flickered across his features. "Good. Then we start now." He led them to a clearing she hadn't noticed the night before. A perfect circle surrounded by ancient stones that hummed with old power. The air itself felt different here, charged with potential. "This is a training circle," Alpha Phoenix explained, gesturing to the stones. "Built by the first Ironwood pack nearly 200 years ago. It amplifies natural magical ability and provides safety measures for when things go wrong." "When things go wrong," Ember repeated. "What kind of things?" His smile was sharp as winter wind. "The kind of things that happen when untrained magical power meets strong emotions, like, say, heartbreak and rage." Heat crept up Ember's neck. I didn't mean to. Of course you didn't. That's why we're here. He moved to the center of the circle, and immediately the stones began to glow with a soft amber light. Magic responds to emotion, especially in the beginning. Fear, anger, joy, desire, they're all triggers. The way he said desire made something flutter low in Ember's stomach, but she pushed the feeling away. She was here to learn about her powers, not to get tangled up with another alpha who would inevitably find her lacking. So how do I control it? She asked, stepping into the circle. The moment her feet crossed the stone boundary, power rushed through her like lightning in her veins. First, you accept it. Alpha Phoenix moved closer, close enough that she caught his scent, cedar and leather and something wild that made her mouth go dry. Close your eyes. I don't think. Close your eyes, Ember. The command in his voice sent shivers down her spine, but she obeyed. Immediately, her other senses sharpened. She could hear Zara's heartbeat from outside the circle, steady and calm. She could smell the old magic soaked into the stones, wild and powerful. And she could feel Alpha Phoenix's presence like a warm wall at her back, solid and reassuring. Now, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell me what you feel. Power, she breathed. Like fire under my skin. Like something alive trying to get out. Good. Don't fight it. Let it flow through you, but don't try to direct it yet. Just experience it. Ember let herself feel the magic coursing through her bloodstream, hot and bright and utterly foreign. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing she could fly. I can feel the temperature rising, she whispered. I can sense flames wanting to dance around my feet. I know. The grass around your feet is starting to smolder. But you're not losing control this time. You're just letting the power exist. She opened her eyes and gasped. The circle was filled with dancing flames that swirled around her in impossible spirals, despite the cool morning air. They caught the sunlight like tiny stars, beautiful and ethereal. How am I doing this? She asked in wonder. You're not doing anything, Alpha Phoenix said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him sharply. That's raw, untrained power responding to your emotional state. The question is, what are you feeling right now? What was she feeling? The grief and anger from last night were still there, but muted. What filled the space they'd left was something she hadn't expected. Hope. For the first time in her life, she felt like she might be more than what others expected of her. I feel possible, she said finally. Like maybe I'm not the broken, weak wolf everyone thought I was. You were never weak, Ember Ravencrest. His voice was soft but certain. You were just sleeping. Their eyes met across the swirling flames, and something passed between them. A recognition, an understanding, a spark of something that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she was precious. Alpha, Zara's urgent voice shattered the moment. We have company. The flames vanished instantly as Ember's concentration broke. Alpha Phoenix's expression hardened, his body shifting into full alert mode. What kind of company? He asked, already moving toward the circle's edge. Shadowpine, Zara said grimly. 4 of them in wolf form, heading straight for us. And one of them. Her golden eyes found Ember's. One of them smells like your ex-mate. Damien was here. Ember felt something twist in her chest that wasn't entirely pain anymore. Well, she said, surprised by how steady she sounded. I guess it's time to find out just how much I've changed overnight. Alpha Phoenix's smile was sharp and predatory. Indeed it is. And Ember. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Remember what you just learned. You're not weak. You never were. The distant sound of howls echoed through the forest. Shadowpine wolves announcing their presence, demanding attention. Let them come, Ember thought, feeling the magic stirring under her skin like a promise. Let them see what they threw away. She was done being the wolf who wasn't enough. It was time to discover what she could become when she stopped trying to be what everyone else wanted. But first, she had to face the mate who'd broken her heart and show him exactly what kind of mistake he'd made. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The 4 Shadowpine wolves burst into the clearing like a thunderstorm, all fury and desperation and barely controlled aggression. Even in wolf form, Ember recognized them instantly. Damien in the lead, his massive golden wolf bristling with alpha authority, flanked by his beta Carson and his gamma Trevor. But it was the human sense clinging to their fur that made her stomach drop. They'd shifted recently, which meant they'd been searching all night. Damien shifted first, rising from his wolf form in one fluid motion that had once made her heart race. Now, watching him stand naked and imperious in the training circle's clearing, Ember felt only a distant ache, like pressing on a bruise that had already started to heal. Ember, his blue eyes swept over her, then fixed on Alpha Phoenix with obvious hostility. I've come to bring you home. The sheer audacity of it stole her breath. Home. After what he'd done. Home, she repeated, and the temperature in the clearing spiked 10 degrees. You mean back to the pack that finds me weak? Back to the territory where I was publicly rejected and humiliated. Without conscious thought, flames began spreading from her feet again. But this time it was different, controlled, purposeful. The fire crystals formed perfect patterns as they raced across the ground, beautiful and deadly. Damien's eyes widened as he took in the supernatural heat radiating from her. Behind him, Carson and Trevor shifted nervously, their wolves recognizing a power they didn't understand. What is this? Damien demanded, gesturing at the flames now coating the entire clearing in silver-gold beauty. This, Alpha Phoenix said, moving to stand beside Ember with predatory grace, is what you threw away, Stormclaw. This is what you called weak. Damien's attention snapped to Alpha Phoenix, and his lip curled in a snarl. Stay out of this, Phoenix. This is pack business. Is it? Alpha Phoenix's smile was sharp as winter wind. Because the woman standing in my territory, demonstrating power you never bothered to recognize, doesn't seem to belong to your pack anymore. He's right, Ember said, surprised by how steady she sounded. I don't belong to Shadowpine anymore. You made that very clear last night. I made a mistake. The admission seemed to cost Damien something. His proud alpha facade cracking slightly. I let politics and pressure cloud my judgment. The pack elders, they said. The pack elders said what? The flames spread faster now, climbing the trees, turning leaves to crystal. That I wasn't good enough? That my bloodline was too weak? That I'd make a poor Luna? They were wrong. Damien took a step toward her, then stopped as the air around Ember shimmered with heat power. We were all wrong, Ember. Please, just come home and we can. What? Her voice cracked like a whip. Pretend you didn't destroy me in front of the entire pack? Pretend you didn't choose politics over love? Pretend you didn't call me weak? The magic was responding to her emotions now, but instead of losing control, Ember felt more centered than she ever had in her life. This was her power, her birthright, her truth finally being revealed. Besides, she continued, her voice gaining a deadly soft quality, I'm not the same wolf you rejected last night. To demonstrate, she lifted her hand and let flames dance across her palm. Not the chaotic explosion of the night before, but deliberate, beautiful, impossible. The flames swirled upward, forming intricate patterns in the air before dissolving into sparkles of golden light. Carson and Trevor took several steps backward. Even in human form, their wolves were cowering from the display of raw magical power. But Damien looked like he'd been punched in the gut. How? He whispered. How is this possible? You really don't know, do you? Zara stepped into the clearing, her golden eyes bright with contempt. You had Selena Ravencrest's heir as your destined mate, and you threw her away because you thought she was weak. Selena Ravencrest, Carson breathed, his face going pale. The Flame Keeper. But that's just a legend. Is it? Alpha Phoenix gestured to the flame-covered clearing, to the fire still dancing around Ember like loyal pets. Does this look like a legend to you? Damien was staring at Ember like he was seeing her for the first time. All this time, all this power was inside you. And you never bothered to look, Ember finished coldly. You never bothered to ask about my family history, my grandmother's stories, anything that made me who I am. You saw what you expected to see, a weak little wolf who would be grateful for your attention. The worst part was she could see the exact moment he realized what he'd lost. The moment the full magnitude of his mistake hit him like a physical blow. Ember, please. He stepped closer, his hand reaching toward her. I can fix this. We can have a proper mating ceremony. I can make the pack accept. Accept what? The magic flared around her, turning the air so hot their breath came out in shimmers. Accept that you were wrong. Accept me back like some discarded toy you've decided you want to play with again. That's exactly what this is. She stood straighter, power crackling around her like a visible aura. You rejected me when you thought I was powerless. Now that you've seen I'm strong, suddenly I'm worth having again. I think, Alpha Phoenix said quietly, that ship has sailed, Stormclaw. Damien's attention snapped to him, and suddenly the air was thick with competing alpha energies. Damien's desperate possessiveness clashing against Phoenix's protective intensity. You have no claim on her, Damien snarled, his wolf very close to the surface. Don't I? Alpha Phoenix moved closer to Ember, not quite touching, but clearly claiming space. She's in my territory, learning from my pack, discovering powers your people were too blind to see. Seems to me she's exactly where she belongs. Enough. The single word rang with power, and both alphas fell silent. I'm not a prize to be won or a territory to be claimed. I'm a woman who knows her worth now. And Damien. She let the flames spread further, let the fire dance higher, let her power fill the clearing with summer heat that should have been impossible. You're not worthy of it. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien looked like she'd physically struck him. You don't mean that, he said finally. The mate bond you severed. Ember's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. The connection you threw away in front of witnesses. That mate bond. You're right about one thing, Damien. There was a mate bond between us. But you destroyed it the moment you chose your precious pack politics over me. And you know what I've discovered? She let the flames spread further, let the fire dance higher. Let her power fill the clearing with heat magic that should have been impossible. I'm so much stronger without it. Ember. Go home, Damien. Her voice was final as a closing door. Go back to Shadowpine and find yourself a proper Luna. Someone weak enough to not threaten your fragile ego. Someone ordinary enough to let you make all her decisions for her. The flames rose from the ground in delicate spirals, forming an actual barrier between her and the Shadowpine wolves. Beautiful and impassable. But know this, she continued, her forest green eyes blazing with golden light. You had something irreplaceable, and you threw it away. You don't get a second chance to break my heart. Damien stared at her through the barrier of fire and magic, his face cycling through a dozen emotions. Regret, longing, anger, and finally, a kind of devastated acceptance. You'll regret this, he said finally, but there was no conviction in it. The only thing I regret, Ember replied, is wasting so many years trying to be enough for someone who was never worthy of what I had to offer. Carson and Trevor were already shifting back to wolf form, eager to escape the supernatural heat and the obvious dismissal. Damien held her gaze for one last moment, and she saw him finally, truly understand what he'd lost. Then he shifted and ran, his pack trailing behind him like the retreat they were. The clearing fell silent except for the gentle whisper of cooling flames. Ember stood in the center of it all, power still crackling under her skin, feeling like she'd just won the most important battle of her life. Well, Alpha Phoenix said finally, his voice warm with admiration. That was magnificent. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving her shaky but exhilarated. She'd done it. She'd faced the wolf who'd broken her heart and emerged stronger, more powerful, more herself than she'd ever been. I meant what I said, she told Alpha Phoenix quietly, about not being a prize to be won. His dark eyes met hers, serious and respectful. I know. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, to explore what might be possible between us, it will be your choice. Your decision. Your terms. The words sent warmth flooding through her that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with being seen. Truly seen for who she was becoming. In the meantime, Zara called from the edge of the clearing. How about we get some breakfast? Watching you burn out your ex-mate worked up an appetite. Ember laughed. Actually laughed for the first time since the rejection. The sound was clear and bright and free, carrying no shadows of the broken woman who'd fled Shadowpine territory just hours before. Breakfast sounds perfect, she said. And then I want to learn everything. Every story, every technique, every secret my bloodline has been hiding. Alpha Phoenix's smile was warm and proud. Then we'd better get started, Ember Ravencrest. You have a lot of power to unlock. As they walked back toward the pack house, Ember felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Excitement for the future. Damien Stormclaw had called her weak, had thrown away what they could have had together. But standing here with flames still glittering on her fingertips and a mysterious alpha who looked at her like she was extraordinary, Ember was beginning to realize that being rejected might have been the best thing that ever happened to her. After all, how could she have discovered who she really was if she'd stayed trapped being who everyone else expected her to be? Chapter 5. Secrets in Ash and Ember. 3 days after Damien's failed attempt to reclaim her, Ember sat cross-legged on the floor of Alpha Phoenix's private study. Her grandmother's journal spread open before her like a road map to a world she'd never known existed. The ancient leather-bound book was filled with Elena's careful handwriting, documenting spells, rituals, and family history that read like something out of a fantasy novel. Except it was all real. Every impossible word of it. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud to Alpha Phoenix, who sat in his leather chair nearby, nursing a glass of whiskey and watching her with those dark, attentive eyes. "The Ravencrest gift comes with a price. Power drawn from the life force itself can burn not just flesh, but hearts, souls, the very essence of what makes us human. Great-grandmother Selena once stopped a man's heart for 3 full minutes before bringing him back. The council called it murder. She called it mercy." Alpha Phoenix set down his glass with a soft clink. "Your great-great-grandmother sounds like she was a formidable woman." "Formidable," Ember repeated, running her fingers over the faded ink. "Or terrifying. I'm not sure there's a difference." For the past 3 days, she'd been training with him every morning, learning to control the fire magic, to channel it through intention rather than emotion. She was getting stronger, more precise. Yesterday, she'd managed to create an entire sculpture out of flame, delicate and beautiful. But the more she read about her bloodline, the more worried she became about what she might be capable of. Alpha Phoenix rose from his chair and moved to sit on the floor beside her, close enough that she could smell his scent, cedar and leather, and something uniquely him that made her wolf stir restlessly. "What else does it say?" he asked, his voice gentle. Ember turned the page, and her breath caught. "Oh, goddess, listen to this. The darkest secret of our line is not the power itself, but what it can become when fed by pain. Selena's sister, Arya, let grief over her mate's death consume her. The fire magic turned inward, and she became something the council called a flame wraith. Neither living nor dead, sustained only by the heat and the hunger for vengeance. She killed 19 wolves before Selena could stop her. Her own sister had to end her life to save the others." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Alpha Phoenix's hand covered hers where it rested on the journal, warm and steady. "That won't happen to you," he said quietly. "How can you be so sure?" Ember looked up at him, seeing her own worry reflected in his dark eyes. "I've been hurt, rejected, filled with anger and pain. What if that's enough?" "Because," he interrupted gently, "you're not alone. You have a pack here, people who care about you. You have training, control, support, and you have me." The last words were said with such quiet intensity that they sent warmth flooding through her chest. Over the past few days, their training sessions had become something more than just teacher and student. There was a connection growing between them, careful and tentative, but undeniably real. "Phoenix," she said, using his first name for the first time. It felt intimate on her tongue, like a secret shared. "What if I'm dangerous? What if this power is too much?" His thumb brushed over her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with fire magic. "Then we'll figure it out together. That's what packs do. We face the dangerous things as a family." A sharp knock on the study door broke the moment. Zara's voice came through the wood, urgent and tense. "Alpha, we have a problem. Council representatives are at the border." The warmth drained from Ember's face. The council, the governing body that oversaw all werewolf packs, only sent representatives when there was serious trouble. Phoenix was on his feet instantly, his expression shifting into full alpha mode. "How many?" "3, and they're asking specifically about our new pack member with unusual abilities." Ember's blood turned to ice in her veins. Someone had reported her magic to the council. Someone who wanted to see her taken away, studied, possibly imprisoned for the safety of others. "Damien," she whispered. "That bastard reported me." Phoenix's eyes flashed with fury. "Over my dead body will they take you?" "You can't fight the council," Ember said, even as her heart swelled at his protective instinct. "If they want me, then they'll have to go through me first." His voice brooked no argument. "And this entire pack. You're under ironwood protection now." Zara burst through the door without ceremony, her face grim. "Alpha, they're not just asking. They have a detention order signed by 3 council elders. It's official. A detention order." Ember's knees went weak. That meant they could legally take her, hold her indefinitely while they assessed the threat level of her abilities. She'd heard stories of wolves who'd been detained by the council. Some came back. Many didn't. I won't go, she said, power beginning to crackle around her as fear spiked through her system. I won't let them lock me away like some kind of monster. The temperature in the room spiked. Flames began forming on the windows, and their breath came out in visible heat shimmers. Ember. Phoenix's voice was calm but urgent. I need you to breathe. Can you do that for me? She tried, but panic was making the magic wild, uncontrolled. Fire crystals were forming in the air around her, and she could see fear flicker across Zara's face. This was exactly what the council was afraid of. Uncontrolled magical power that could hurt innocent people. I can't, she gasped. I can't control it when I'm scared. Phoenix moved in front of her, his hands cupping her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Yes, you can. You're stronger than your fear, stronger than their prejudice. Look at me. His dark eyes were steady, certain, full of a faith in her that she didn't feel in herself. But somehow, focusing on him helped slow the wild spiral of her magic. That's it, he murmured. Just breathe. You're safe here. I won't let them take you. Gradually, the fire crystals stopped forming. The flames on the windows began to fade. The supernatural heat cooled until only the warmth of his hands on her face remained. What are we going to do? She asked quietly. Zara cleared her throat. Actually, I might have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Both Phoenix and Ember turned to look at her, hope and wariness warring in their expressions. There's an old pack law, Zara continued, from before the council was formed. If a wolf claims sanctuary with a pack and proves their worth through trial by combat, they can't be removed without just cause. Trial by combat, Phoenix repeated slowly. Against whom? Against me. Zara's smile was sharp as a blade. I volunteered to be her opponent. Win or lose, it establishes her right to stay and forces the council to prove actual wrongdoing before they can detain her. Ember stared at the other woman, this fierce, scarred warrior who barely knew her, but was willing to risk injury to protect her rights. Zara, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Zara's golden eyes were serious. I told you I've been where you are. Someone took a chance on me once when I needed it most. Time to pay it forward. Will it work? Phoenix asked, though Ember could see he was already thinking through the logistics. It should. The law predates council authority, and they can't ignore Pack's sovereignty without risking a broader conflict. Zara grinned. Plus, if word gets out that they're detaining wolves for having strong magical abilities, every pack with gifted members is going to start asking uncomfortable questions. Ember looked between them. Phoenix with his protective fury and Zara with her willing sacrifice, and felt something settle in her chest. Not just gratitude, but belonging. These people were fighting for her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because they saw her as family. Let's do it, she said firmly. But I want it understood. I'm not just fighting for the right to stay. I'm fighting to prove that having power doesn't make me a monster. Phoenix's smile was fierce and proud. Then let's go show the council exactly what kind of wolf they're dealing with. As they headed for the door, Ember caught Phoenix's arm. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing in me. Always, he replied, and the single word carried the weight of a promise. They walked toward the confrontation together, Alpha, warrior, and the witch who was finally ready to stop hiding what she was. But as they stepped out into the morning light, Ember couldn't shake the feeling that this trial would demand more than just physical combat. The council had come prepared for a fight. The question was, were they prepared for the full power of a Ravencrest who'd finally stopped apologizing for what she was? Chapter 6, Trial by Fire. The Ironwood Pack had assembled in their ceremonial arena, a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside where their ancestors had settled disputes for 2 centuries. But Ember had never seen it filled with quite this much tension, or quite this many official-looking strangers in expensive suits. 3 council representatives, she murmured to Phoenix as they approached the arena's edge. That seems like overkill for one supposedly dangerous wolf. They're not here just for you, Phoenix replied, his dark eyes scanning the assembled crowd. They're here to make an example. Show every pack what happens when they harbor wolves with uncontrolled abilities. The 3 council representatives stood at the center of the arena like they owned it. The leader, a stern man with silver hair and cold gray eyes, wore the traditional council robes that marked him as an elder. The 2 women flanking him looked like enforcers, all muscle and barely contained aggression. I am Elder Blackwood, the man announced, his voice carrying easily across the arena. By order of the Werewolf Council, we are here to detain one Ember Ravencrest for evaluation of her magical abilities and assessment of potential threat to pack communities. Murmurs of unease rippled through the gathered Ironwood wolves. Several pack members shot supportive glances toward Ember, but she could also see the fear in some faces. Magic made people nervous, even when it belonged to someone they were starting to care about. "And I," Zara called out, stepping into the arena with warrior's confidence, "invoke the ancient right of trial by combat to contest this detention." Elder Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly. Trial by combat. That law hasn't been invoked in over 60 years. But it's still valid, Phoenix said, moving to the arena's edge with alpha authority radiating from every line of his body. Pack's sovereignty predates council jurisdiction. If Zara defeats Ember in fair combat, it proves she's not an uncontrolled threat. The elder's smile was thin and calculating. Very well. But if Miss Ravencrest loses control during this trial, if she demonstrates the kind of dangerous magical excess we've been warned about, the detention order stands regardless of combat outcome. Ember's stomach dropped. It was a trap. They wanted her to lose control, to prove their point about dangerous magical wolves. Zara caught her eye and gave her a reassuring nod, but Ember could see the concern there too. "I understand the terms," Ember said, stepping into the arena, "and I accept them." The two women faced each other in the center of the ancient stone circle, the afternoon sun casting long shadows around them. Zara was taller, more muscled, with years of combat training evident in every movement. But Ember had something Zara didn't: power that hummed just beneath her skin like electricity, waiting to be unleashed. "Remember what we practiced," Zara said quietly as they circled each other. "Control first, power second. Show them you're not a monster." Ember nodded, dropping into the fighting stance Phoenix had been teaching her. Around them, the arena fell silent except for the sound of their footsteps on ancient stone. "Begin," Elder Blackwood commanded. Zara moved first, fast and fluid, coming in low with a strike aimed at Ember's midsection. But Ember was ready. She sidestepped and let a thin layer of heat shimmer across the ground where Zara's foot would land next. Zara's foot hit the superheated stone and she hissed, but recovered with grace that spoke of years of experience, using the momentum to spin into a kick that barely missed Ember's ribs. "Nice," Zara grunted, approval clear in her voice. "But you'll have to do better than party tricks." Ember grinned, feeling more confident as her magic responded to her will rather than her fear. Fire crystals began forming in the air around her. Not chaotic like when she was panicked, but controlled, purposeful, beautiful. The gathered wolves gasped as Ember sent the crystals spinning toward Zara, not to hurt, but to create a barrier that forced the other woman to change direction. Zara vaulted over the fire wall with impressive agility, but Ember was already moving, heat waves rising from her footsteps to make the air itself treacherous to navigate. "Show off," Zara laughed, but there was admiration in her voice. They danced around each other like performers in some deadly ballet. Zara's warrior training against Ember's growing magical control. Flames formed and faded and reformed, creating obstacles and opportunities, while Zara used speed and strength to counter every heated barrier. The crowd was entranced. What had started as a tense legal proceeding was becoming something beautiful, a demonstration of power used with precision and creativity rather than destructive force. "This is hardly a proper trial," Elder Blackwood called out, frustration clear in his voice. "Where is the uncontrolled magical excess we were warned about?" "There isn't any," Ember replied, never taking her eyes off Zara but speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Because I'm not the monster you want me to be." Zara chose that moment to escalate, coming in fast with a series of strikes that forced Ember to retreat. But instead of panicking, instead of letting fear make her magic wild, Ember used the fire more creatively, creating a slide of superheated air that let her glide away from Zara's attacks, forming handholds of crystallized flame that gave her leverage for counterstrikes. The temperature in the arena was rising steadily, but it wasn't the chaotic heat of uncontrolled magic. This was purposeful, artistic, a summer storm shaped by will and intention. "Goddess," someone in the crowd whispered. "She's not just using magic. She's conducting it." That's when Zara made her move for the apparent finishing blow. A perfect tackle that should have brought Ember down hard. But Ember was ready. She let Zara's momentum carry them both forward. Then at the last second created a cushion of warm air that caught them both, rolling them across the arena floor in a tangle of limbs that ended with both women laughing despite themselves. "Yield," Zara called out, grinning as she found herself pinned beneath a net of fire crystals that were somehow strong as steel but light as spiderwebs. The flame dancer wins. The arena erupted in cheers. Ember had won, but more than that, she'd proven her point. Her magic wasn't a destructive force to be feared. It was a tool, an art, a gift that could be beautiful and controlled and purposeful. "The trial is concluded," Elder Blackwood announced, his voice tight with defeat. "However, the council maintains the right to monitor." "The trial is concluded," Phoenix interrupted, his alpha authority brooking no argument. "Ember Ravencrest has proven her control and earned her place in this pack. Any further council interference will be met with formal challenge to your jurisdiction." Murmurs of agreement rose from the Ironwood wolves, and Ember could see the council representatives calculating whether this was a fight worth picking. Apparently it wasn't. "Very well," Elder Blackwood said finally. "But this matter is far from closed. The council will be watching Miss Ravencrest." "It won't happen," Ember said firmly, rising to her feet with flames still glittering around her like a crown. "Because I know what I am now, and I'm not afraid of it anymore." The council representatives left without another word, their expensive shoes clicking against stone as they retreated to whatever transportation had brought them here. The arena slowly emptied as pack members dispersed, chattering excitedly about what they'd witnessed. But Ember barely noticed. All her attention was focused on Phoenix as he approached, his dark eyes bright with pride and something deeper, warmer, more personal. "That was incredible," he said quietly, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You are incredible." The way he was looking at her, like she was magnificent, like she was everything he'd ever wanted, made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with the trial she'd just won. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, suddenly very aware that they were alone in the arena now, the last of the crowd having drifted away. "Any of you. This pack, it's given me something I never had before." "What's that?" he asked, moving closer still. "A home where I don't have to apologize for what I am." Something passed between them then, a recognition, an acknowledgement of all the careful dancing around each other they'd been doing. The attraction that had been building since that first night when she'd stumbled into his territory, heartbroken and lost. "Ember," he said, her name a rough whisper. "Alpha." Zara's voice carried across the arena, urgent and concerned. "We have another problem." Phoenix's jaw tightened with frustration, but he stepped back, alpha responsibilities taking precedence over personal desires. "What now?" Zara jogged toward them, her expression grim despite their recent victory. "Damien Stormclaw is at our borders again. But this time he's not alone. He's brought his entire pack leadership, and they're demanding a formal audience." The triumph of the trial drained away, replaced by cold dread. Damien had been embarrassed when he'd tried to reclaim her and failed. Now he was back with backup, which meant he wasn't planning to take no for an answer. "Let him come," Ember said, fire crystals beginning to dance around her fingers again. Not from fear this time, but from determination. "I'm done running from my past." Phoenix's smile was sharp and proud. "Then let's go remind Damien Stormclaw exactly what he threw away." As they walked toward what was surely going to be another confrontation, Ember felt the power humming under her skin like a promise. She had proven to the council that she wasn't a monster. Now it was time to prove to Damien, and to herself, that she was so much more than the weak wolf he'd rejected. After all, she was Ember Ravencrest, heir to the Flamekeeper bloodline, member of the Ironwood Pack, and a woman who had finally learned to stop apologizing for being extraordinary. Chapter 7. The Pack Wars Begin. The Shadowpine delegation arrived like a war party. 6 black SUVs carrying not just Damien, but his father Alpha Stormclaw, Luna Miranda, the Pack Beta and Gamma, and half a dozen other high-ranking wolves. They came in force, projecting the kind of authority meant to intimidate and overwhelm. But Ember wasn't the same terrified woman who'd fled their territory a week ago. She stood on the Ironwood Pack house steps between Phoenix and Zara, watching the procession with calm eyes and flames dancing lazily around her fingertips. The power that had once frightened her now felt like a security blanket. Hot comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Alpha Stormclaw emerged from the lead vehicle first, his graying hair and stern features marking him as a wolf used to getting his way. Damien followed, looking haggard in a way that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Behind them came the rest of Shadowpine's leadership, a show of force that would have been overwhelming a week ago. Now it just looked desperate. "Alpha Phoenix," Alpha Stormclaw called out, his voice carrying the particular blend of courtesy and condescension that powerful men used when they wanted something. "I come requesting formal audience to discuss the return of a Shadowpine Pack member who has been misguided." Misguided? Phoenix's voice was dangerously polite. "Is that what we're calling it when your son publicly rejected his destined mate and drove her from Packlands?" Damien visibly flinched at the reminder, but Alpha Stormclaw's expression didn't change. "Young wolves make mistakes. We're here to correct those errors and restore proper pack bonds." "Proper pack bonds," Ember repeated, stepping forward before Phoenix could respond. "You mean the bonds you allowed your son to sever in front of witnesses? Or are we talking about different bonds entirely?" She could see the surprise flicker across several Shadowpine faces. The last time they'd seen her, she'd been broken and fleeing. Now she stood with her shoulders straight and power crackling visibly in the air around her. Every inch the confident woman she'd never been allowed to become in their territory. "Ember, dear," Luna Miranda stepped forward, her maternal instincts apparently overriding pack politics. "We've all made mistakes. Damien realizes now what he lost. What we all lost when you left. Can't we find a way to heal this?" The genuine care in Luna Miranda's voice hit harder than all of Alpha Stormclaw's posturing. Ember had loved Damien's mother like her own, had dreamed of earning the right to call her family. But that dream belonged to a different woman, one who'd been willing to shrink herself to fit into spaces that were too small for her spirit. "I loved you too, Luna Miranda," Ember said softly. "But love isn't enough to fix what's broken here. Some things can't be healed. They can only be learned from." "Ember, please." Damien stepped forward, his blue eyes bright with an emotion that might have been genuine regret. "I know I hurt you. I know I made the worst mistake of my life. But we're destined mates. That has to count for something." "Were," she corrected quietly. "We were destined mates until you severed that bond in front of our entire pack because you found me weak." The temperature around them dropped several degrees, and flames began forming delicate patterns on the ground at her feet. But this time it wasn't from loss of control. It was from absolute crystalline clarity about what she wanted. "I was wrong," Damien's voice cracked with desperation. "I was young and stupid and let other people's opinions matter more than my heart. But I know better now. I've seen what you're capable of, how powerful you really are." "Stop." The single word rang with such authority that even Alpha Stormclaw took a step back. "You've seen how powerful I am, so now I'm worth wanting. You loved me when you thought I could be useful, and now you love me because you think I could be dangerous." The flames spread faster now, creating intricate mandalas on the ground that pulsed with golden light. Around them, both packs watched in fascination as Ember's magic responded not to fear or anger, but to absolute conviction. "That's not love, Damien. That's possession. That's politics. That's everything I never want to be part of again." "Now see here, young lady," Alpha Stormclaw began, his patience clearly wearing thin. "No." Phoenix's voice cut across the older Alpha's words like a blade. "You don't get to young lady her. You don't get to come onto my territory and speak to one of my pack members like she's a disobedient child." The air crackled with competing alpha energies as the two powerful wolves faced off. Around them, pack members from both sides shifted nervously, wolves caught between loyalty and instinct. "Actually," Ember said, stepping between the two alphas before the confrontation could escalate further, "I can speak for myself." She turned to face the Shadowpine delegation, power humming under her skin like a song only she could hear. The flames at her feet spread outward in perfect spirals, beautiful and unmistakably magical. "I am not a Shadowpine Pack member anymore. I gave up that claim when I left your territory. I am Ember Ravencrest of Ironwood, and I choose to remain here with wolves who see my power as a gift rather than a threat." Gasps rose from several Shadowpine wolves. Formally claiming membership in another pack was a serious declaration, one that couldn't be easily undone. "You can't mean that," Damien whispered, his face pale. "Ember, what we had was beautiful," she admitted, and for a moment the old softness crept back into her voice. "But it was also based on me being less than I really am. You fell in love with the idea of me, Damien, the quiet, grateful little wolf who would be honored to stand in your shadow." The flame patterns around her feet grew more complex, more beautiful, reaching toward both packs like an offering of summer's artistry. But I'm not that wolf. I never was. I'm the granddaughter of Elena Ravencrest, heir to the Flame Keeper bloodline, a woman with fire in her veins and power in her bones. I'm extraordinary, Damien, and I'm done apologizing for it. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as two packs watched a woman claim her truth with magic dancing around her like loyal subjects. "Oh, sweetheart," Luna Miranda whispered, tears in her eyes. "You really have grown into who you were meant to be." "She has," Phoenix said, moving to stand beside Ember with obvious pride. "And she belongs here with wolves who appreciate what she brings to our pack." Something in his tone made Alpha Stormclaw's eyes narrow, and Ember saw the exact moment when the older Alpha realized this wasn't just about pack membership. It was about mate bonds and territories, and the kind of alliances that could shift regional power dynamics. "I see," Alpha Stormclaw said slowly. "This isn't just about our son's mistake. You're claiming her for your own pack, your own interests." The implication in his words made Phoenix's expression darken dangerously. "I'm not claiming anything. Ember makes her own choices. But if those choices happen to align with what I want..." His smile was sharp as summer heat. "Well, that's between us." The way he said it, the way his dark eyes found hers with heat and promise, sent warmth flooding through Ember that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with desire finally acknowledged. "This is ridiculous," Damien snapped, his composure finally cracking. "You've known her for a week. I've known her my entire life. We grew up together, planned a future together." "A future you threw away," Ember interrupted, her voice final as breaking glass. "A future you decided I wasn't worthy of. You don't get to change your mind now, because circumstances have changed. And if I refuse to accept that," Damien demanded, his wolf rising to the surface, blue eyes flashing with challenge. "If I invoke my rights as your original destined mate?" Phoenix stepped forward, his own wolf snarling beneath the surface. "Then you'll have to go through me." The confrontation teetered on the edge of violence. Two alphas squaring off over a woman who belonged to neither of them, and both at the same time. Pack members on both sides tensed, hands moving to weapons, wolves preparing for the kind of fight that could spill blood and destroy alliances. "Enough." Ember's voice cut through the testosterone-fueled posturing like a knife through silk. "I am not a prize to be won or a territory to be claimed. I am a woman making my own choices." Her power flared around her, fire crystals forming in the air between the two men, forcing them apart with delicate but unmistakable barriers. "Damien, you had your chance. You chose pack politics over love, appearances over truth. That choice has consequences." She turned to Alpha Stormclaw. "And you, Alpha, enabled that choice. You taught your son that power mattered more than people." Her voice softened slightly as she looked at Luna Miranda. "I'm sorry that our family won't be what you dreamed. But I found a new family here. One that accepts all of me, not just the parts that are convenient." She took Phoenix's hand, feeling his fingers close around hers with warmth and certainty. "I choose Ironwood. I choose wolves who see strength as a gift rather than a threat. And yes, I choose the possibility of something real with someone who has never asked me to be less than I am." The defeat in Damien's eyes was absolute and heartbreaking. But beneath it, Ember saw something that might have been understanding. Finally, truly understanding what he'd lost. "I hope he deserves you," Damien said quietly. "I hope he's everything I failed to be." "He already is," Ember replied gently. "Because he sees me, Damien, all of me, and he's never once asked me to apologize for what I am." The Shadowpine delegation left as they'd arrived, in a convoy of black vehicles disappearing into the afternoon. But this time, they left without what they'd come for. This time, they left knowing that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. As the last vehicle disappeared around the bend, Ember became acutely aware that she was still holding Phoenix's hand, still standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "So," she said, looking up at him with sudden shyness, "I may have just publicly declared my interest in possibilities with you." His smile was warm and real, and full of promises she was finally ready to hear. "You may have. The question is, are you ready to explore what those possibilities might look like?" Standing there with flames glittering around her feet and her hand in his, Ember felt something she'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the right person, at exactly the right time. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm ready." Chapter 8. Hearts of Fire. 3 hours after the Shadowpine delegation's departure, Ember found herself in Phoenix's private study again. But this time, everything felt different. The air hummed with possibility, with words spoken and choices made, with the electric awareness of two people who had finally acknowledged what was building between them. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted, curled up in the leather armchair across from his desk with a glass of wine warming her hands. "For someone else to show up demanding I prove myself, or go somewhere, or be something different than what I am." Phoenix looked up from the pack reports he'd been pretending to read for the past 20 minutes. In truth, he'd been stealing glances at her, memorizing the way firelight caught the auburn in her hair, the way she moved with newfound confidence even in moments of vulnerability. "No more shoes," he said quietly. "No more demands or tests or people who want to change you. Just this us. Whatever we want to make of it." The wine was making her bold. Or maybe it was the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious he never expected to find. "And what do you want to make of it?" she asked, setting down her glass and meeting his eyes directly. He set aside his reports and rose from his desk, moving to sit on the couch that faced her chair. Close enough to touch, but respectful of the space between them. "I want to know everything about you," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "Your favorite memory. What makes you laugh. What you dream about when you're not having nightmares about the past. I want to know what you look like when you wake up in the morning. How you take your coffee. Whether you sing in the shower." Her heart skipped at the intimacy in his words. Not sexual, though there was heat there too, but emotional. The desire to know her, really know her, in all the small ways that mattered. "I dream about soaring," she said quietly. "Not shifting and running, but actual flying. Rising over forests and mountains with trails of golden fire streaming behind me like wings." "Tell me more." So she did, in the warm glow of firelight, with wine loosening her tongue and his genuine interest encouraging her. Ember found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. How she used to sneak out to practice magic in the woods behind her childhood home. How her grandmother's stories had always felt more real than the world around her. How she'd spent years trying to dim her own light to fit into spaces that were too small for her spirit. Somewhere during her stories, Phoenix had moved from the couch to the floor beside her chair, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell the cedar and leather scent that was uniquely his. "I used to think I'd never find my mate," he admitted when she paused. "I'm 34 and I've been alpha for 10 years. I'd started to believe the moon goddess had forgotten about me, or decided I didn't deserve that kind of happiness." "Why would you think that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something shadowed his expression, and for a moment she saw past the confident alpha to the man beneath. One who carried his own scars, his own doubts. "My parents were true mates," he said quietly. "Perfect for each other in every way. When my mother died in a rogue attack, my father, he didn't survive losing her. Went into the forest one night and never came back." "Oh, Phoenix." Without thinking, she reached out and covered his hand with hers. "I'm so sorry." His fingers turned under hers, intertwining their hands in a gesture that felt natural as breathing. "I watched him die by inches after she was gone," he continued. "Saw what that kind of love could do to someone when it was lost. I decided I was better off alone than risking that kind of devastation. Until," she prompted gently, "until an auburn-haired woman with forest-green eyes stumbled into my territory with a broken heart and magic she didn't know how to control." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Until I realized that some risks are worth taking." The air between them shifted, charged with more than just attraction now. This was recognition. Two damaged souls who'd found healing in each other's presence. "Phoenix," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. He rose to his knees, bringing their faces level, close enough that she could count his eyelashes in the firelight. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly, "and I will. Tell me you're not ready, that it's too soon after Damien, that you need more time." "Don't stop," she breathed. And then his lips were on hers. The kiss was everything her first kiss with Damien had never been. Gentle but certain, patient but passionate, full of promise rather than possession. His hands cupped her face like she was made of spun glass, and she could taste wine and desire and something deeper, something that felt like home. Without conscious thought, her magic responded to the emotion flooding through her. But instead of the wild flames of fear or anger, this was something new, fire that glowed with warm light, swirling around them like a blessing. Phoenix pulled back just enough to watch the glowing flames dance around them, wonder clear in his expression. "That's new," he said, soft laughter in his voice. "Happy magic," she said, equally amazed. "I didn't know that was possible." "Everything's possible with you," he murmured and kissed her again. This time the kiss deepened, became something hungrier, more desperate. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, while his arms wrapped around her waist to lift her from the chair and settle her on his lap. But when his hands moved to the hem of her sweater, she stiffened slightly, old fears surfacing despite the desire coursing through her. He felt the change instantly, pulling back to search her face with concern. "Too fast?" he asked gently. She struggled to find words for the tangled mess of want and fear in her chest. "Damien was my first, my only, and he made me feel like I was never. Like I wasn't enough, even in that." "You are everything," Phoenix said fiercely, his hands framing her face again. "You are magic and strength and beauty, and everything I never knew I needed. But we don't have to." "I want to," she said quickly. "I want you. I need you to know that I might be awkward, that I might need." "I need you to know," he interrupted gently, "that we have all the time in the world. That there's no pressure, no expectations, no timeline but ours." The patience in his voice, the absolute certainty that she was worth waiting for, melted the last of her fears. "Then show me," she said, her voice stronger now. "Show me what it feels like to be cherished instead of just wanted." Ember woke to pale morning sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the warmth of strong arms around her waist. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Where was she? Whose bed? Then memory returned in a rush of sensation and emotion. Phoenix's gentle hands, his whispered endearments, the way he'd worshipped every inch of her skin like she was something sacred. "Good morning, beautiful." His voice rumbled against her ear, rough with sleep and satisfaction. She turned in his arms, suddenly shy but unwilling to hide from what they'd shared. In the morning light, he was even more devastating. Hair mussed from her fingers, eyes warm with contentment, a smile that was just for her. "Good morning," she whispered back, then blushed at the husky quality of her own voice. "Any regrets?" he asked, though the question was gentle teasing rather than real concern. The way she was curled against him, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertips, made her feelings clear. "Only that it took us so long to get here," she admitted. A sharp knock on the bedroom door made them both freeze. Zara's voice was urgent, worried. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. There's someone at the borders asking for Ember specifically. Says she's family." Ember's blood went cold. Family? Her parents had died years ago, and her grandmother. "What do they look like?" she called through the door, pulling the sheet up to cover herself. "Older woman, silver hair, green eyes just like yours. Says her name is Elena Ravencrest." The world tilted sideways. Elena Ravencrest, her grandmother, who had supposedly died when Ember was 17. Her grandmother, who was apparently very much alive and standing at the ironwood borders. "That's impossible," Ember whispered. "She's dead. I went to her funeral." Phoenix was already moving, reaching for clothes, his protective instincts kicking in. Family or not, no one sees you until we know what's going on. But even as she nodded agreement, Ember's heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with hope. What if her grandmother was alive? What if the woman who'd first told her about Ravencrest magic, who'd filled her childhood with stories of fire and wonder, was really standing just beyond the treeline? And what did it mean that she'd appeared now, just when Ember had finally claimed her power and found her place in the world? Chapter 9. Phoenix Rising. Ember's hands shook as she pulled on clothes, her mind reeling with impossibilities. Her grandmother, her sweet storytelling grandmother who died of heart failure when Ember was 17, standing at the borders like some ghost made flesh. It couldn't be real. But then again, a week ago, she would have said the same thing about fire magic and mate bonds and finding love after devastating heartbreak. "We don't have to do this now," Phoenix said, watching her struggle with the zipper of her jacket. "We can wait, plan, figure out what's really going on." "No." Ember's voice was steadier than she felt. "If it's really her, if my grandmother is somehow alive, then I need to see her. I need to know why she let me believe she was dead for 5 years." They walked to the Pax border in silence, Zara flanking them along with Maya and Nox from the patrol that had first found Ember. The morning air was crisp with autumn promise, but Ember barely noticed. All her attention was focused on the figure waiting just beyond the tree line. And there she was. Elena Ravencrest stood exactly as Ember remembered her. Silver hair braided with copper ribbons, forest green eyes that missed nothing, wearing a flowing dress that seemed to shimmer between gold and crimson like captured firelight. She looked exactly the same as she had 5 years ago, which should have been impossible for a woman who'd been in her 70s. Grandmother. The word escaped Ember's lips like a prayer, like a question, like an accusation all at once. Hello, little flame. Elena's voice was exactly as Ember remembered. Warm honey over steel, carrying love and secrets in equal measure. You've grown into your power beautifully. The pet name, Little Flame, hit Ember like a physical blow. How many nights had she cried herself to sleep after the funeral, wishing she could hear that voice one more time. You're supposed to be dead, Ember said, her voice breaking. I watched them lower your coffin into the ground. I threw earth on your grave. Pain flashed across Elena's weathered features. I know, child, and I'm sorrier for that than you can possibly understand. But it was the only way to keep you safe. Safe from what? Flames began forming at Ember's feet, her magic responding to the emotional turmoil churning in her chest. Safe from knowing I had family left? Safe from learning about my heritage before I nearly lost control and hurt people? Phoenix moved closer, his presence a warm anchor as her power threatened to spiral. But he didn't touch her, didn't try to calm her. He simply stood ready to catch her if she fell. Safe from them, Elena said urgently, her eyes darting to the forest around them as if she expected threats to emerge from the shadows. From the ones who would use your power for their own ends, who would bind your magic to their will until there was nothing left of the granddaughter I love. Who are they? Zara demanded, her warrior instincts clearly on high alert. And why should we believe anything you say? You've been letting her think she was alone for 5 years. Elena's attention shifted to Zara, and something like approval flickered in her green eyes. A fierce protector. Good. She'll need wolves like you for what's coming. What's coming? Phoenix's voice was hard with suspicion and protective fury. Who are you really? And what do you want with Ember? Elena's smile was sad and proud as she looked back at Ember. I am exactly who she thinks I am, Elena Ravencrest, last of the Flame Keeper bloodline before my granddaughter. But I'm also something else, something I could never tell her when she was young. She lifted her hand, and fire crystals began dancing across her palm. Not the chaotic power of awakening magic, but something controlled, ancient, impossibly refined. I am the guardian of the old magic, keeper of the bloodline secrets, protector of powers that could reshape the werewolf world if they fell into the wrong hands. The fire crystals swirled upward, forming complex patterns that pulsed with golden light. Patterns that looked remarkably similar to the ones Ember had been unconsciously creating during her training. Guardian, Ember repeated slowly. That's why you faked your death. To protect some kind of magical secret. To protect you, Elena corrected. The council knew about your bloodline, knew that Selena Ravencrest's power would eventually manifest in one of her descendants. They've been watching our family for generations, waiting. Waiting for what? But even as Ember asked, she suspected she knew the answer. Waiting for a Ravencrest powerful enough to serve their purposes, to become their weapon. Elena's expression darkened. The council isn't just a governing body, Little Flame. They're building something, an army of magically gifted wolves under their absolute control. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The detention order, the way Elder Blackwood had been so eager to take Ember away for evaluation, the council representative's obvious disappointment when she'd proven her control. They weren't trying to protect other wolves from me, Ember whispered. They were trying to collect me. And when I realized your power was awakening, when I felt the fire magic calling across the distance between us, I knew I couldn't hide anymore. They'll be coming for you soon, with more than just detention orders this time. Over my dead body, Phoenix snarled, his alpha power flaring around him like a visible aura. Elena's attention shifted to him, and Ember saw her grandmother's eyes narrow with what looked like calculation. Ah, Elena said slowly. The new mate bond. I can smell it on you both, fresh and strong. And her eyes widened slightly. Extraordinary. What do you mean? Ember asked. True mate bonds with Ravencrest bloodline members are rare, Little Flame. The magic tends to complicate things. But when they do occur, when they're genuine and freely chosen. She gestured between Ember and Phoenix. They can amplify power exponentially. The implication hit Ember like ice water. You're saying that being with Phoenix makes my magic stronger? Stronger, more stable, more dangerous to those who would control it. Elena's smile was sharp as summer heat, and more valuable to those who would steal it. Which means, Zara said grimly, that Ember isn't just a target anymore. She's become a priority target. Exactly, which is why I'm here. Elena stepped closer to the border, her expression intense. I need to complete your training, little flame. Teach you the true depths of Ravencrest magic before they come with enough force to take you regardless of pact protection. And why should we trust you? Phoenix demanded. You let her believe you were dead for 5 years. How do we know this isn't some elaborate council trap? For answer, Elena raised both hands, and the air around them filled with swirling flames that formed intricate patterns. Patterns that told stories, that danced with life and memory and impossible beauty. Remember the summer you were 8, little flame, she said gently. When you caught fever and nearly died? I sat by your bed for 3 days, creating fire dancers to keep you entertained while you healed. The flame patterns resolved into tiny figures, dancing wolves and leaping deer and soaring eagles, all made of fire and light and grandmother's love. Ember gasped, recognizing the exact same figures that had captivated her fevered imagination all those years ago. Only you knew about that, Ember whispered, tears filling her eyes. Only you could recreate them. Exactly. I am who I say I am, child. And I'm here because I love you, because I've been watching from the shadows for 5 years, and because time is running out. Ember looked around at her new pack family. Zara ready to fight for her, Maya and Nox alert and protective, Phoenix radiating barely contained fury at anyone who would threaten her. She thought about the trial by combat, about proving her control and her worth. But if Elena was right, if the council was planning something bigger, then everything they'd won might not be enough. What do I need to learn? She asked. Elena's smile was proud and fierce. Everything, little flame. Combat magic, protective wards, power amplification through mate bonds, and most importantly, how to hide your true strength until you're ready to use it. Then you teach her here, Phoenix said firmly, on Ironwood territory with pack protection. No more separations, no more secrets that keep her isolated. Elena considered this, then nodded slowly. Acceptable. But we start today, and we train hard. Because if my sources are correct, the council is planning something for the next full moon. What happens at the next full moon? Ember asked, though she dreaded the answer. The conclave, Elena said grimly. A mandatory assembly of all pack leaders and their most powerful members. The perfect opportunity to collect magical wolves under the guise of official business. The full moon was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to learn centuries of hidden magic. To prepare for a confrontation that could determine not just Ember's fate, but the future of magical wolves everywhere. Then we'd better get started, Ember said, fire crystals beginning to dance around her hands as her power responded to her determination. But as Elena smiled with fierce pride, Ember couldn't shake the feeling that her grandmother was holding something back. Some final secret that would change everything she thought she knew about her family, her power, and the war that was coming for them all. Chapter 10. The Flames of War. 1 week into training with her grandmother, and Ember felt like she'd spent her entire life asleep, only now beginning to wake up. Every morning brought new revelations about what her bloodline could do. Every afternoon pushed her limits further than she thought possible. And every evening she collapsed into Phoenix's arms, feeling simultaneously exhilarated and terrified by her own growing power. Focus, little flame, Elena called from across the training circle, her voice carrying the particular blend of love and steel that only grandmothers possessed. The fire spheres are meant to incapacitate, not illuminate. Prettier doesn't mean more effective. Ember gritted her teeth and reshaped the delicate flame sculptures she'd unconsciously created into something more practical. Jagged spears of crystallized fire that could punch through armor or pin an enemy to a tree. Better, Elena acknowledged. But you're still thinking too small. Show me Summer's fury, not Summer's beauty. Ember closed her eyes and reached deeper into the well of power that seemed to grow stronger every day. The temperature in the training circle spiked so fast that heat waves shimmered off every surface in seconds. When she opened her eyes, the entire space was filled with swirling flames that moved like living things, ready to blind, confuse, or burn any enemy that dared approach. Holy hell! Maya breathed from the edge of the circle where the entire Ironwood pack had gathered to watch the morning training session. She's creating an actual firestorm. Good, Elena said, apparently unbothered by the supernatural heat surrounding them. Now hold it while fighting. Without warning, she launched a barrage of fire projectiles at Ember. Not enough to seriously injure, but enough to force her to defend while maintaining the firestorm. Ember spun, creating barriers of crystallized flame to deflect her grandmother's attacks while keeping the storm swirling around them. It was like trying to conduct an orchestra while solving math problems. Every piece of her attention pulled in different directions. One of Elena's fire spears cracked through her defenses, slicing across her shoulder. The pain broke her concentration for just a moment, but that was enough. The firestorm collapsed, the temperature normalized, and she found herself facing her grandmother with nothing but a thin shield of flame between them. And that, Elena said gently, is why we train. In real combat, you won't have the luxury of perfect concentration. Ember pressed a hand to her bleeding shoulder, frustrated with herself. I can do better. Let me try again. You can and you will, but not today. Elena's expression softened with concern. You've been pushing yourself too hard, little flame. Magic requires balance, power and rest, effort and recovery. She's right, Phoenix said, stepping into the circle with that particular blend of alpha authority and mate worry that made Ember's heart skip. You've been training 8 hours a day for a week. You need to eat, sleep, and heal. Elena's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement as she watched Phoenix examine Ember's wound with gentle, possessive care. Actually, she said thoughtfully, this might be the perfect time for the next lesson. What kind of lesson? Ember asked wearily. Her grandmother's lessons had a way of being more intense than expected. Mate-bonded amplification, Elena replied, her smile mysterious and slightly wicked. The magic I mentioned when we first met. Understanding dawned, and Ember felt heat flood her cheeks. Grandmother, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting. Not that kind of amplification, child, though physical intimacy does enhance the effect. Elena's laughter was rich and warm. I'm talking about magical resonance. Learning to blend your power with your mate's energy to create something stronger than either of you could achieve alone. Around them, pack members began to disperse with various levels of embarrassment and interest. Zara shot Ember a thumbs up before dragging Maya and knocks away from the increasingly intimate conversation. True mates, Elena continued, especially those involving magical bloodlines, can share more than just emotional bonds. With training, you can share strength, healing, even magical ability itself. That sounds dangerous, Phoenix said, though Ember could hear the intrigue beneath his caution. Extremely dangerous if done wrong, Elena agreed, but potentially life-saving if done right. And given what we're facing, she gestured toward the forest, toward the wider world where the council was gathering its forces. We need every advantage we can get. Ember looked between her grandmother and her mate, the two people in the world she trusted most, and made her decision. Teach us, she said simply. An hour later, they sat in Phoenix's study in a triangle formation, candles flickering around them in patterns Elena claimed would help focus their energy. Ember could feel the magic humming just beneath her skin, but there was something else too, a warm pulse that seemed to echo Phoenix's heartbeat. Close your eyes, Elena instructed. Both of you. Ember, I want you to find your power center, that place inside you where the fire magic lives. Ember let her eyes drift closed, sinking into the familiar sensation of hot light that lived in her chest. The magic was stronger now than it had been even a week ago, more responsive, more eager to answer her call. Good. Now, Phoenix, I want you to find your center too. Not magical power, but the core of what makes you alpha. Your strength, your protective instincts, your authority. Ember could feel it when Phoenix found what Elena was describing. A warm golden energy that spoke of leadership and loyalty and fierce protection. It made her wolf purr with contentment, recognizing the perfect complement to her own hot power. Now, Elena said, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality, reach for each other. Not with your hands, with your energy. Let your power touch his strength, Ember. Let your authority embrace her magic, Phoenix. It started as a tentative brush, fire meeting warmth, hot light touching golden strength. But the moment their energies connected, something extraordinary happened. Power exploded through both of them. Not painful, but overwhelming. Ember gasped as she felt Phoenix's strength flowing into her, steadying her magic, giving it structure and purpose it had never had before. At the same time, she felt her fire power flowing into him, sharpening his alpha abilities, giving him access to magical senses he'd never possessed. Through the connection, she could feel what he felt, the protective fury that consumed him whenever she was threatened, the bone-deep certainty that she belonged to him just as completely as he belonged to her. And she knew he could feel her responses too, the way her heart raced when he smiled, the absolute trust she felt in his presence, the growing love that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. This is... Phoenix's voice was shaky with awe. I can feel your magic like it's part of me. And I can feel your strength, Ember whispered. It's like having roots, something solid to anchor the power to. Beautiful, Elena said, and there was deep satisfaction in her voice. But don't try to hold it too long the first time. The connection is intoxicating, but it can burn you out if you're not careful. Reluctantly, they let the connection fade, though Ember could still feel echoes of Phoenix's presence in her mind like warmth on a cold day. That, Elena said with deep satisfaction, is what the Council is afraid of. Not just individual magical power, but bonded magical power. The kind that can't be controlled or contained or stolen. Because it requires genuine love, Ember said, understanding flooding through her. You can't force that kind of bond. Exactly. And you can't replicate it with wolves who've been magically bound against their will. Elena's expression darkened. Which is why they'll try to separate you, to break the bond before it can reach its full potential. They can try, Phoenix said, his voice rough with protective fury. But they'll have to kill me first. That's exactly what I'm afraid they'll try to do, Ember said quietly, cold dread settling in her stomach. At the conclave, they'll find some excuse to challenge you, to remove you from the equation. Which is why, Elena said grimly, we need to be ready for war. Before anyone could respond, urgent howls echoed across Ironwood territory. Not the casual communication of pack members, but the sharp staccato warnings that meant immediate danger. Alpha, Zara's voice carried clearly through the study windows. We have multiple vehicles approaching fast. Official council transport. Ember's power flared instinctively, heat spreading across the study windows as her magic responded to the threat. But this time, instead of chaotic flames, she felt Phoenix's strength weaving through her power, giving it focus and direction. So much for 2 weeks to prepare, she said grimly. Elena was already rising, her own power crackling around her like visible lightning. Then we fight with what we have. Phoenix's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. Through their connection, she felt his absolute determination to protect her, to protect their pack, to face whatever came next together. Together, he said simply. Outside, the sound of vehicles grew closer, and Ember could smell the particular blend of authority and aggression that marked council enforcers. They'd come in force this time, with more than just detention orders. But they'd also come to face a Ravencrest who'd found her power, her pack, and her mate. They'd come to face wolves who were ready to fight for their freedom. Let them come, Ember said, fire crystals beginning to dance around her hands as power and love and fierce determination merged into something unstoppable. It's time to show them what happens when you threaten a mated pair who've learned to share their strength. As they prepared to face their greatest challenge yet, Ember felt something she'd never experienced before. The absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. And together, they were stronger than any force the Council could bring against them. Chapter 11. The Battle for Freedom. The Council had come to war. 8 black armored vehicles surrounded the Ironwood pack house, disgorging not just the 3 representatives from before, but a full tactical team. Wolves in dark uniforms moved with military precision, carrying weapons that gleamed with silver and hummed with magical energy. They're not here to talk, Ember observed, fire crystals beginning to form in the air around her as she watched the deployment from the pack house windows. No, Phoenix agreed, his alpha power rising to meet the threat. They're here to collect, contain, or eliminate. Elena moved to stand between them, her ancient power making the very air shimmer with potential. Then we show them why Ravencrests have been feared for centuries. Alpha Phoenix, Elder Blackwood's voice carried across the pack grounds, amplified by magic to ensure everyone could hear. By order of the Werewolf Council, you are harboring a dangerous magical individual who poses a threat to pack stability. Surrender Ember Ravencrest immediately. Phoenix's response was a roar that shook the windows and sent several council operatives stumbling backward. Ironwood does not surrender family to tyrants. Around them, the entire pack began to gather. Zara and her patrol, Maya and Nox, dozens of other wolves who'd accepted Ember as one of their own. The air crackled with competing energies as magical abilities, both known and hidden, began to manifest. For the first time, Ember realized that Ironwood had more gifted wolves than just her. A young man she'd barely spoken to was calling small flames from his fingertips to scout the council positions. An elderly woman was weaving what looked like camouflage magic around pack members. Zara herself was moving with inhuman speed and grace that spoke of enhanced physical abilities. "We're not alone," she breathed, understanding flooding through her. "Did you think Phoenix accepted you just for your power?" Elena asked with a proud smile. "Ironwood has been a sanctuary for gifted wolves for decades. That's why I chose them. That's why the moon goddess led you here. You have 30 seconds to comply," Elder Blackwood called out, "or we will consider this an act of rebellion against council authority and respond accordingly." Ember stepped toward the door, power coursing through her veins like liquid starlight. "Then I guess we're rebels." "Ember, no," Phoenix started, his protective instincts flaring. "Together," she reminded him, reaching for his hand. "You said together." The moment their fingers touched, the mate bond amplification kicked in. Ember felt Phoenix's strength flowing into her, steadying her magic while her fire power sharpened his alpha abilities to supernatural levels. "Besides," she said, her voice carrying a new note of authority that made several pack members straighten with recognition, "it's time they learned what a real flamekeeper can do." They stepped outside together, the pack flowing around them in a protective formation that spoke of absolute loyalty. The autumn air was crisp with approaching winter, and Ember could feel the season's power calling to her magic like an old friend. Elder Blackwood's eyes widened slightly as he took in the united front. Not just Ember and Phoenix, but an entire pack of gifted wolves ready to fight for their family. "You came here expecting to find one frightened witch," Ember said, her voice carrying clearly across the grounds. "Instead, you found wolves who've chosen family over fear." Heat began spreading from her feet in intricate patterns, but this wasn't the chaotic fire of fear. This was Summer's artistry made weapon, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. "Deploy containment protocols," Elder Blackwood snapped to his operatives. Full magical suppression. Several council wolves activated devices that hummed with magical energy. Suppression fields designed to dampen supernatural abilities. The air itself seemed to thicken, and Ember felt her power being pressed down, contained. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. The magic that had become as natural as breathing was suddenly muffled, distant, hard to reach. But then Phoenix's strength flowed through their bond, and she remembered Elena's lessons about power shared and amplified. Instead of fighting the suppression alone, she reached through their connection. "Now," she whispered. Together, they shattered the suppression field like glass. Fire and alpha authority combined into something the council's technology couldn't contain, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. The battle erupted in an explosion of flame and fury. Ember moved like summer incarnate. Fire spears flying from her hands to pin council operatives to trees, heat creating treacherous footing that sent enemies sprawling, walls of crystallized flame rising to protect pack members from magical attacks. Phoenix fought with alpha strength amplified by fire magic, moving faster than should have been possible, striking with force that sent armored wolves flying. His presence alone making enemy wolves instinctively submit. Around them, the pack fought as a unified force. Zara danced between enemies too fast to track, the elderly woman's camouflage magic making pack members effectively invisible, while young wolves called upon gifts they'd hidden for years. But it was Elena who truly showed them what centuries of magical knowledge could accomplish. Firestorms erupted from her hands, binding spells froze enemies in place, and protective wards deflected magical attacks that should have been devastating. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually win. The council forces, expecting to face one untrained witch, were overwhelmed by coordinated resistance from an entire pack of gifted wolves. Then Elder Blackwood raised a device that pulsed with dark energy, and everything changed. "Enough!" he screamed, and the device in his hands erupted with magical force that wasn't meant to suppress, it was meant to sever. The energy slammed into Ember and Phoenix like a physical blow, but worse than pain was the sudden absence where their bond had been. The connection that had been growing stronger every day, that had let them share power and strength and love, was being systematically torn apart. Ember screamed as half her soul was ripped away. Phoenix collapsed to his knees, his enhanced abilities vanishing as the amplification broke. Around them, the tide of battle shifted as their combined power source disappeared. A bond breaker, Elena gasped, horror clear in her voice. They brought a bond breaker. Ember had heard of such devices in her grandmother's stories. Ancient magical weapons designed to sever the connections between mates, to break bonds that had been forged by the moon goddess herself. They were forbidden, considered crimes against nature itself. But the council had brought one anyway. Fighting through the agony of separation, Ember tried to reach for her magic. But without Phoenix's strength to stabilize it, without their bond to focus it, her power felt wild and dangerous again, more likely to hurt her pack than help them. "Surrender now," Elder Blackwood called out, triumph clear in his voice, "and we'll let your pack live. Continue to resist, and we'll break every bond, sever every connection, until you're all just isolated, powerless wolves with nowhere to belong." Despair crashed over Ember like a tidal wave. This was exactly what the council wanted, to prove that magical bonds could be broken, that love and loyalty meant nothing against their technology and authority. She could see Phoenix struggling to reach her, blood trickling from his nose where the bond breaking had caused internal damage. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and she saw her own pain reflected in his gaze. The pack was faltering. Several wolves had been captured, others were injured, and more council reinforcements were arriving by the minute. They were going to lose. "Little flame." Elena's voice cut through the despair and chaos like a blade. "Do you remember what I told you about the difference between beauty and fury?" Ember looked at her grandmother, bloodied but unbowed, ancient power still crackling around her like protective lightning. "Summer's beauty doesn't make it less dangerous," Ember whispered, understanding flooding through her. "It makes people forget how deadly it can be." "Exactly. And you, my dear granddaughter, have been showing them your beauty." Elena's smile was fierce and proud and terrifying. "Perhaps it's time they met your fury." Ember looked around at her pack, her family, bloodied and captured and facing defeat because they'd tried to protect her. She thought about Phoenix, struggling to breathe through the pain of their severed bond. She thought about all the magical wolves who would face the same fate if the council succeeded here. "You want to see what a real flamekeeper can do?" she called out to Elder Blackwood, her voice carrying a heat that made the autumn air itself shimmer. "You want to break bonds and steal power and turn magic into a weapon of oppression?" The temperature spiked so fast that the council operatives' breath came out in panicked puffs. Fire began forming on their weapons, their armor, their skin. "Then let me show you why the council was founded to contain us in the first place." Ember reached deeper into her power than she ever had before. Past the controlled flames, past the beautiful fire, into the ancient heart of summer itself. The part that scorched as well as warmed, that ended as well as began. Around her, the very air began to burn. Chapter 12. From Ashes We Rise. The silence before Ember's fury was complete and terrifying. Even the wind stopped as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what the granddaughter of Selena Ravencrest would unleash. "You want to know what the first Flamekeepers could do?" Ember's voice echoed with otherworldly power, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You want to understand why the council was created to contain us?" The temperature spiked beyond anything natural, past scorching, past desert heat, into realms where the very air became dangerous to breathe. Council operatives began backing away, their weapons trembling in hands that were rapidly going numb from heat exhaustion. What happened next wasn't magic in any recognizable sense. It was summer itself made manifest, primal and absolute and utterly merciless. Fire erupted from the ground in towering pillars that pierced armor and pinned enemies where they stood. The air filled with crystalline heat, not the controlled spears of her training, but a firestorm of razor-sharp fragments that could melt steel and char bone. Council operatives screamed as their magical devices overloaded and melted. Their vehicles' engines seized as coolant turned to steam. Their weapons became too hot to hold, burning exposed skin with heat that spread like wildfire. Elder Blackwood raised his bond breaker again, but the device cracked and died as fire formed in its delicate mechanisms. For the first time since arriving, the elder looked genuinely afraid. This wasn't the controlled woman who'd proven her abilities in trials and training. This was something primal, elemental, a force of nature given form and fury. Ember's eyes had gone completely golden, flames crowned her hair like a diadem, and power rolled off her in waves that made reality itself shimmer with heat. Magnificent, Elena breathed, her voice carrying both fierce pride and growing concern. But little flame, remember who you're fighting for. Don't let the fury consume what you're trying to protect. The words cut through Ember's rage like a knife through silk. Through the haze of elemental fury, she saw her pack, her family, watching her with expressions that ranged from awe to terror. She saw Zara, bloodied but unbowed. She saw pack members who'd fought beside her now backing away from the supernatural heat that radiated from her very presence. And she saw Phoenix struggling to stand despite the pain of their severed bond, his eyes fixed on her with absolute love and growing worry. "Ember," he called, his voice somehow carrying across the howling wind of her own making. "Come back to us. Come back to me." For a heartbeat, she teetered on the edge of a choice that would define everything. She could let the fury consume her completely, become the weapon of summer's wrath that could melt armies and bring down governments. She could be the monster the council claimed magical wolves were destined to become. Or she could choose love, choose family, choose to be more than her power. "No," she said, and her voice carried a different kind of strength now. Not the overwhelming force of summer's fury, but the quiet power of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. The firestorm didn't stop, but it changed. Instead of chaotic destruction, it became purposeful, protective. Fire barriers rose between council forces and pack members. Superheated ground created impassable terrain that cut off escape routes while leaving safe paths for her wolves. "This is what you fear," Ember said, her voice carrying clearly despite the storm. "Not the magic itself, but what it represents: choice, freedom, the power to protect what we love instead of being told what to serve." Around them, council operatives were retreating toward their vehicles, those that could still move after being exposed to supernatural heat. But Elder Blackwood stood his ground, his face twisted with fanatic determination. "You think you've won?" he screamed over the wind. "This changes nothing. We have dozens of facilities, hundreds of operatives, thousands of ways to contain threats like you." He pulled another device from his robes. Not a bond breaker this time, but something that pulsed with dark energy and made Ember's magical senses recoil in instinctive revulsion. "A life drain," Elena gasped in horror. "He's going to try to steal your power directly." Elder Blackwood activated the device, and suddenly Ember felt her magic being pulled away, drawn into the technological horror in the Elder's hands. But it wasn't just magic being stolen. It was life force, memories, everything that made her who she was. She tried to resist, but the device was designed specifically for this, to drain magical wolves dry and leave empty husks behind. Already, she could feel her consciousness beginning to fray at the edges. That's when Phoenix did something that should have been impossible. Despite the bond breaker, despite the magical interference, despite every technological barrier the council had created, he reached across the space between them with pure force of will and love. The mate bond, wounded but not destroyed, flared back to life like a phoenix rising from ashes. Suddenly, Ember wasn't fighting the life drain alone. Phoenix's strength flowed into her. Not through magical amplification this time, but through the fundamental connection that bound their souls together. The Elder's device, designed to drain one magical individual, couldn't cope with the doubled power source. The life drain device overloaded with a sound like breaking glass and exploding stars. Energy that had been meant to steal Ember's power backfired catastrophically, and Elder Blackwood screamed as his own life force was drained instead. He collapsed to the superheated ground, unconscious but alive, the device smoking and dead beside him. The sudden silence was deafening. The firestorm faded to gentle flames, the supernatural heat eased to merely summer warm, and Ember stood in the center of it all, feeling more herself than she ever had before. Phoenix reached her first, his hands gentle as they cupped her face, his eyes searching hers for any sign of the fury that had nearly consumed her. "Are you?" he started. "I'm me," she said simply. "I chose to be me." Around them, the pack began to gather, checking on the wounded, securing the unconscious council operatives. Zara approached with a grin despite the blood on her lip. "Well," she said cheerfully, "that was intense. Think they got the message." Ember looked at the scene around them. Council vehicles disabled, operatives unconscious or fled, Elder Blackwood's technological horrors destroyed. But more than the physical victory, something fundamental had shifted. "They'll come again," she said quietly. "But not like this. Word will spread about what happened here. About magical wolves who fought back and won. About bonds that technology can't break, and power that won't be contained." Elena approached, looking older than her years but radiant with pride. "You did exactly what needed to be done, little flame. You showed them that magic isn't something to be controlled or stolen. It's something to be respected. But more than that," Ember said thoughtfully, her hand finding Phoenix's, "we showed them that magical bonds, real ones, chosen ones, make us stronger, not weaker." In the distance, the surviving council operatives were loading their unconscious elder into a vehicle and preparing to retreat. But they moved differently now, with the weary respect of people who'd just learned that the world was bigger and more dangerous than they'd thought. "What happens now?" Phoenix asked, his arms sliding around her waist in a gesture that was both protective and celebratory. Ember looked around at her pack, her family, the wolves who'd fought beside her not because they had to, but because they chose to. She thought about other magical wolves in other territories, hiding their gifts and living in fear. "Now we build something better," she said, her voice ringing with purpose. "Sanctuaries for gifted wolves, networks of support, a world where magical abilities are celebrated instead of feared." "A rebellion," Zara said with obvious enthusiasm. "A renaissance," Ember corrected with a smile. "A magical renaissance." 6 months later. The Ironwood territory had tripled in size over the past 6 months as magical wolves from across the continent sought sanctuary and training. What had started as one pack's defiance had grown into a movement that was reshaping the werewolf world. Ember stood in the doorway of the new training center, watching as Elena led a group of young wolves through their first attempts at elemental magic. Fire flowers bloomed under one girl's touch while a boy called Small Lightning to dance around his fingers. "Admiring your grandmother's work?" Phoenix asked, sliding his arms around her from behind. "Admiring all of our work," she corrected, leaning back against his chest. "Look at them, Phoenix. 6 months ago, they were hiding what they were, afraid of their own gifts. Now they were laughing as they learned, sharing techniques and stories, growing into their power with confidence instead of fear." "The council's been quiet," Phoenix observed. "They're regrouping, figuring out how to handle a world where magical wolves aren't isolated and afraid anymore." Ember's smile was sharp as summer heat. "Let them. We're not the same wolves they tried to contain." Zara approached from across the training ground, her expression bright with news. "The Seattle Pack just sent word," she called out. "They want to establish a satellite sanctuary, and the Colorado Wolves are asking for training instructors." The movement was spreading faster than any of them had dared to hope. Magical wolves who'd spent years hiding were coming forward, and traditional packs were opening their borders to gifted refugees. "Any regrets?" Phoenix asked quietly, his question meant only for her. Ember considered the question seriously. She thought about the quiet life she might have had as Damien's Luna, never knowing her true power. She thought about the woman she'd been just months ago, broken, rejected, convinced she wasn't enough. "Only that it took rejection to set me free," she said finally. "Damien throwing me away was the best thing that ever happened to me. His loss was definitely my gain," Phoenix murmured against her ear, making her shiver with pleasure. She turned in his arms, struck once again by how perfectly they fit together. His strength complementing her magic, his steady warmth balancing her elemental power. "What do you think?" she asked. "Ready to change the world with you?" His smile was warm and certain and full of promises. "I'm ready for anything." Happy flames began to dance around them. Not from magic this time, but from the approaching summer that would be their second full season together. Real fire mixed with magical fire, and Ember laughed as Phoenix caught the sparks on his tongue like a child. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now, without the fear and doubt that had once held her back. "Always and forever," he replied, and kissed her as flames swirled around them like a blessing. In the distance, more vehicles were arriving. Another group of magical wolves seeking sanctuary, another family about to find their home. Ember Ravencrest had been rejected by the wolf who couldn't see her worth, broken by a pack that feared her power, and nearly destroyed by a council that wanted to steal her magic. But she'd been saved by love, strengthened by family, and freed by the courage to embrace exactly who she was meant to be. Sometimes the greatest magic wasn't what you could destroy, it was what you chose to build. And as laughter echoed across Ironwood territory, as magical children learned to control gifts they no longer had to hide, as wolves found family and purpose and the freedom to be extraordinary, Ember knew she'd found something worth every moment of heartbreak that had led her here. The fire that had once threatened to consume her had become the light that guided others home. And that, she thought as Phoenix spun her around in the dancing flames, was the most powerful magic of all. The end.